afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra, and I'm so happy that you could join us for Heart Gallery's monthly webinar, Navigating Adoption Conversations with Children. We're very thankful that you could join us today. We're very excited to have Chelsea Castro, Senior Permanency Resource Specialist, and David Daniels, Transition Age Youth Program Specialist from the Texas Alliance of Child and Family Services. Chelsea is a social worker and has multiple years of experience working with youth, most often overlooked for adoption, including teenagers, children with special needs, and sibling groups as an adoption recruiter. David has worked directly with college students and young adults with lived experience as a motivational consultant and champion for foster care, helping them to navigate their emotional and academic journeys with the skills and resources they need. After the presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. So if y'all have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I'll be monitoring them, or you can also wait till the end to ask them directly. I'll also be following up with everyone after the training through email, and I'll be providing some contact information and some resources. But for now, please help me welcome Chelsea and David. So thank you, David. Thank you, Chelsea, for being here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for having us. And like Cassandra said, I am the Senior Permanency Resource Specialist here at the Alliance. I've been here, I think, going on about 5 years now. Previously was an adoption recruiter, and now I'm helping lead our adoption subcommittee, our LA lived experience subcommittee, just a whole bunch of different work groups in this field. So I'm honored to be here. And David, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Daniels, David G. Daniels. I've been a G since I was born, so nobody can ever take that away from me. And the G stands for grateful today. Grateful to that you all decided to tune in to our webinar. I am the Transitional Age Youth Program Specialist, and I deal with extended foster care across the region, across the state. That's my main focus, but I support my colleagues in doing any and everything that they ask me to do, from T3C to collaborations to asset concepts, maps, anything that they need, I do it. So that's what I do. But my focus is extended foster care across the state of Texas.
Okay, so before we dive in, I just really want to just take a quick walkthrough of what we hope to accomplish today. First, we'll talk about the continued importance of adoption and lifelong connections for youth in foster care, especially as we continue to see more people aging out without any type of permanency connection. We'll also explore how professionals can begin the adoption related conversation piece with youth in ways that are feel safe and respectful. And another focus is that we'll be understanding how these conversations can look different depending on the child's age and stage of development. And we'll also discuss how we can support families in creating open and ongoing conversations about adoption so youth can feel heard and supported and included in their story. So first, I just want to highlight this piece of data that we have got from the DFPS website. We all know as professionals that we are seeing less children entering into foster care each year, which is a big thing to celebrate. But what we continue to see is a concerning number of youth leaving foster care each year without any type of legal permanency. So for the past decade, you can see between 800 and 1,200 youth in Texas have aged out of foster care each year, and the number is still slightly increasing, which is, can be really concerning. When young people who age out without permanency, they often face significant challenges transitioning into adulthood without that lifelong support of a family. So this data here is just to remind us why our work as permanency professionals is so important and it's so critical to our everyday job. Every conversation we have with youth and families about adoption and permanency, it really does matter because it can help ensure that more young people who leave foster care can leave with an actual permanency and lasting connection. Oops. So I want to just talk about what me and David and a couple of our other coworkers had the privilege of doing this summer. We started in May in Houston and we ended, I think it was in Tyler in August. So we had the opportunity to go around the state of Texas and interview or ask frontline staff and ask young adults who actually aged out of foster care, what the barriers of extended foster care was, and what they faced before aging out of foster care. So you'll see we did 8 in-person convenings, we did one virtual convening, we spoke to over 205 young adults and 120 frontline staff, and we made sure that they were actual frontline staff who were working with these individuals, these young adults, versus the leadership level. We really wanted to talk to boots on the ground, people who and get their what their everyday life was, what their challenges were, what they saw as pros, what they saw as cons, and to gather that data. So that's where some of our conversations ideas are coming from today.
And let me just say that we do a lot of work, but to be in these convenings with these young adults, these youth, these young people who want to contribute to society, want to contribute to their community, to who are super resilient. It was just amazing to be there. We asked them about the challenges and the barriers and the gaps that they were experiencing, transitioning out of foster care and into adulthood and what that looked like. And two things that I would just mention to you all just to show you how impactful it was is one young lady stood up and said, I just want to meet someone that has not read my file. I want someone to interact, experience me, get to know me, support me without having read my file first. I thought that was just so insightful. And then when we asked them about successful adult living, and we did a report, and if you have not, you can reach out to me or Chelsea. But once we wanted to make sure that we centered their voices and kept their voices at the forefront of the report. And the amount of young people that when we ask them what does successful adult living look like to you, the amount of them that says giving back, paying forward, helping someone else, helping another young person, it was just amazing. So I always live by the quote, and I find the strength to carry my own burdens when I help someone carry theirs. And so to have these young people having these challenges and transitioning to adulthood and trying to navigate this life, but still wanting to give back and support other people, it was mind blowing. So our convenings across the state, across the region were absolutely amazing. And it was just resilient to see these young people. I just want to put that shameless plug in there.
Thank you, David. Yes. And so during these convenings, we identified 10 key findings from our conversations with young adults. But due to time today, I'm just going to highlight one that stood out to me was that many young adults shared that they wish that they had left foster care with at least just one permanent supportive connection, whether it had been a legal permanency, whether it had been just someone that they had some type of connection with before aging out. They expressed that having someone to turn to for guidance could have made a significant difference as they transitioned to adulthood. Some of them were actually homeless at the time. They're like, if I had at least that one permanent connection, maybe I would not be in the situation that I'm in as of today. They also shared that they hope to explore whether reconnecting, they wish they had help reconnecting with biological family members, that if it could have been a safe option. They mentioned that there's so many people on their team prior to 18. They have their caseworker, they have their attorney, they have their CASA worker, foster care coordinator. They have all these people on their team. And then at 18, when it's time for them to make these really big decisions, like, should I stay in extended foster care? Should I reconnect to biological family? There was no one to help them navigate those situations. So one thing that they really highlighted to us was that they wish they had just that little help on should I reconnect to biological family and what that process would look like.
So we want to dispel the rumor, the myth that these young people transitioning, aging out of care do not want assistance. They absolutely want support and assistance 18 and after. So we want to dispel that because that was the running narrative is that when they turn 18, they just want to be free and get gone, as they said, and it's not absolutely correct at all.
So why adoption conversation matters. I think we all really know this, but we highlighted also during these convenings that this approach matters because adoption is not just about placement, it's about their long-term well-being. It's not just about what's happening, maybe to us as professionals, it's happening as what's happening now, but these are their lifelong term well-being. So what's happening to their future life. So first, it builds on empowerment and emotional wellness. When children feel heard and respected, involved in their decisions, their confidence just grows. Empowered youth are more emotional regulated, more hopeful, and more prepared to engage in permanency planning in a healthy way whenever they're involved in these decisions. And second, it prepares youth for lifelong decision making and self-advocacy. Adoption is doesn't just eliminate life challenges, but it really helps enhance their voice and those decision making. So we're not just preparing them for adulthood, we're preparing them for what their decision making looks like in the future.
It
But
it also
yeah.
it also gives them the youth, the as Chelsea said, the youth voice. When youth are included in conversation about their future, they do feel respected, they feel heard, and they feel that decisions are being made with them instead of without them. This is good too because it reduces the fear of misinformation. Many youth have questions of misconceptions about adoption. Open conversations allow the process to be more free and more safe. I experienced this personally myself when I was put into foster care. I spent 16 years in foster care, and when I was placed in the foster care, and we'll talk later about the biological connection, but I was told when you're placed for put up for adoption, you have to terminate all your parents' rights are terminated, and you have no connection with them whatsoever. You cannot communicate with them anymore, and that created so much fear and so much anxiety and so much misinformation for me that I was not able to make sound, informed decision about what my future looked like and what was better options for me. We'll talk about it more, but had there been a conversation that supported or painted a better narrative of my biological family and then my adoptive process journey, it would have yielded different results. I might have made different choices for my future. So that is very strong and very key why these conversations matter. I also want to mention that this adoption conversation matters because it builds trust. When you meet a young person or a child and you meet them, you're meeting them as your authentic self, right? So you have the heart posture for this young person. You have the honesty, you have the integrity, you have the stability, you have all these things. You're a well-rounded individual and an adult, and you are able to take on this task of helping this young person feel loved and supported, right? But they have met so many adults prior to you. So they have met adults who have broken promises. They have met adults who have not showed up or who have caused them more bad than good, as in such as trauma. So when you show up with these young people, show up to children and youth in this space, you have to be cognizant and remind yourself of how are you showing up as the adult in their life, and then put yourself in their space of what has the experience been with adults. Like every adult that has come into their life has brought them a new experience or a new challenge. And so when you build trust, when adults are honest and transparent about the adoption, youth are more likely to feel emotionally supported. And then the strength through permanency and belonging, even if the adoption does not go the way that we plan, there is still conversation that helps the youth think about lifelong relationships and supportive connections. And we'll talk about that more because just because it didn't go the way that we'd hoped for or planned does not mean that that is a broken connection for that young person or that child.
So, honest conversations build trust and help children understand their own story in a healthy way. When we're engaging in adoption conversations, there are a few important things that we should consider, encourage our families, and for us as professionals to keep in mind. It's always important to be, like David said, to be honest and also age appropriate. Children, they deserve the truth. They've probably had, like David said, many adults come in and out of their life, many different placements, many different changes. So they deserve to know what's truthfully happening in their lives. We should also encourage families and professionals to avoid negative language about birth families. Many children maintain deep emotional connections to their birth families, and they always will. So speaking respectfully helps protect a child's identity and their sense of belonging. Another important piece is validating children's emotions. Adoption can bring up so many feelings, curiosity, sadness, confusion, loyalty conflicts, and children need to feel that it's safe for them to express these emotions to an adult. Um, it's it's sometimes it's the most answer, to be honest, is saying like, you know what, I don't know the answer right now, and that's okay. What matters is just letting a child know that you are willing to explore some of their questions that they may have, even if you don't have the right answer at that moment. when families and professionals are able to step back and see the human side of a child, it is experiencing it's seeing that they're human. Me and David were actually at a training a couple of weeks ago, and one of the staff asked us, our families are so scared of adoption, and they're so scared of these children and of these teens. And it really stuck with me, and I really had thought about it. I'm like, can you imagine how scared the children are? Can you imagine how scared those young adults are? If the families are scared of them, the children are just as scared as the families. We need to give them grace of all their past that they've been through. And it also resonated with me. An example was like we had one of our coworkers who went to a different program, right? And we're like, oh, we need to give this coworker some grace and some, they just had this huge transition, so we need to, give them some time to adapt to their new role. And I'm thinking, it's the same thing with our children. If they are moving to a new home, if they are moving to a new family, that's not just a work grace that we need to be giving them. Think about the grace that we should be giving them. So I don't know, that just stuck with me a few weeks ago when one of the staff asked us, like, how do we help our families? They're so scared of the word adoption. They're so scared of these children. And I just thought, like, these children are human too. Can you imagine how scared they are of these families as well, what they're going through?
And I agree. The open conversation and the trust and emotional safety and the long-term family relationships, I look at it as this, and when we talk about adults coming in and out of the young people's lives, everyone is paid to be in the young person's life once they enter into the child welfare system. The caseworker is paid to be there. The teachers are paid to be there. The foster parents are paid to be there. The therapist is paid to be there. So showing up for these young people is, in their understanding, is who really cares for me, who really loves me, who really wants to support me and to see me win, and who's with me on this journey. And so this is a journey and it's an experience. And so you want to cultivate this experience for them to be something that is memorable. You look back on your adoptive process. It's a lot of feelings, it's a lot of emotions, it's a lot of detachment and reattachment. It's new attachments, it's new environments, new experiences, new cultures, and you have to incorporate your culture, your likes, things like that that you have to remember. But I want to share a personal quick story about when I was 11 and I entered foster care, and I had a child advocate, and I didn't believe that the child advocate really cared for me, right? It was this young fly. She was a white lady in her 20s. And I'm like, hey, what do you want with this black boy? And she was like, I want to help you. And I was like, I don't believe you, but okay, we'll try. So she said, well, what do you need? What do you want? And I said, well, first off, if you want to help me, give me a laptop. She got me a laptop. And then she said, now on to the serious things. What do you want? And I said, I would like to talk to the judge myself about my experience and my family dynamics. And she said, well, they usually don't allow children in the courtroom or in the judge's chambers to talk to them. I said, but you asked me what I wanted, and this is what I wanted. And she fought for me to have my day in court, as they say, and I was able to sit and talk with the judge about being put up for adoption. And then back then they used the term put up for adoption. And the judge asked me, what did I want? And I told him, I said, it just seemed too easy. And back then I didn't fully understand it because, again, they told me that if I was placed in adoption, my parents' rights would be terminated. And so I told the judge, it just seems too easy for parents to have a child and just give up all their rights and responsibilities. And so I said, I do not want my parents' rights to be terminated. If I am tethered to this child welfare system at 11 years old and I have to go through this, then they will be attached to it as well. And so the judge said he gave me what I wanted. But in that moment at 11 years old, I learned that I had a voice. I learned where my confidence came from. And in this child welfare, I spent 16 years in foster care. And though every day was not a bright and shiny day, and though I made bad decisions, and some days I felt insecure or I had struggles with self-doubt and all these things, that little boy at 11 years old that was given that voice and was given that honesty and that transparency and that safe place to express themselves, it did come into fruition later in life. If you teach, if you plant the seed early, you might not always be there to see the fruition of your labor and of your time and of your passion and of your giving, but someone else along, another CASA worker will come along and be the sun. Another caseworker will come along and be the water. Another foster parent or another adoptive process will come along and fertilize all that you have put in and worked for, and you might not get to see it. And so it is so important when we talk about these difficult questions and being transparent. And you look up the word transparency, and it means for light to shine through an object, right? And so remind yourself as you're the adult, but you're allowing the young person to shine through your transparency, through your honesty, through your ability to navigate those tough conversations and those questions. I had no shame and no doubt and no embarrassment about saying, "Hey, I'm in foster care. They wanted to put me up for adoption, but it required them to terminate my parents' rights, and I said no." So I just want to share that personal story about how I developed a voice at 11. And I didn't always have that in certain group homes and certain shelters that I stayed in, but it reminded me of the possibility that if I speak up, there's a possibility and an opportunity that things will change, things will get better, and that I will build up my confidence.
Thank you, David, for sharing that. And so, initiating adoption conversations as professionals working with youth in foster care, our role is to, like David said, help open the door for these conversations and not force them. Adoption, as we all know, is a sensitive topic, especially for youth who may have experienced, or who all of them have experienced a loss in their life. One of the most helpful things that we can do is create a safe opportunities for these conversations. So this may happen just in everyday activities. Use open-ended questions can also help youth feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts. It's also important that we present adoption as a possible permanency option while making sure that the youth or the children know that the feelings and questions that they have are valid. So one thing that I did as when I was an adoption caseworker is that I had a young man. He was a teenager, and he was known as the troubled kid. He had never opened up to his teachers, his caseworker, his attorneys. They're like, let's add him. We'll put him on your caseload because we can't get anywhere with him. What I did know about him though was that he wanted to be a future rapper when he grew up. So he liked to listen to music. This was years ago. So his favorite artist at the time was Drake, Drake the rapper, right? And I'm like, I'm terrified of this kid just as much as he's probably doesn't want to talk to me. And I'm like, what can we do? So I got him in my car and I was like, let's just drive around, right? Let's just drive around. We listened to the Drake album, no conversation, no talking. We just for the first three visits, we went to like drove around his school, we drove around his neighborhood. All right, well, see you in a couple of weeks. He came back in my car a couple of weeks. We did that for three times. And he finally looked at me, and this is a teenager who, like I said, did not talk to anyone. He looked at me and he said, "This is years ago, guys." He said, "Are you young? Are you old enough to even be driving me?" And I'm like, "Okay, he's opening up to me." I'm like, "Well, actually, I am old enough to be driving you." And I take that as a compliment. And that's kind of where our relationship started, is that he's like, "You look so young to be driving me." But I let him lead that adoption conversation. And even that was a way of him breaking down his wall of like, you know what? You're listening to Drake. You're not dressed like my normal caseworker coming in. Like I would wear jeans, a hoodie. I try to like be as normal as I can be to him, to these children that I was visiting and trying to get them to open up to, and not come in with like the clipboard and the check mark of have you ate? Check. Do you have shelter? Check. Like really try to be as relatable as you can. And to that, and he ended up at 16 years old, almost 17, a month before he turned 17, being adopted by one of his coaches who he had joined the basketball team, and his coach never even knew he was in foster care because that never opened up to him. And so just that one, initiating that adoption conversation can look so many different ways. Just, let it be youth led, be consistent in what you're doing.
And I love that,
Oh,
and Chelsea
sorry.
and I talked about this, and we had this conversation, and I loved how she talked about the relatability. Um, I look at my own life, and when you're giving the loved ones and the people in your life grace, and I talked about this before. I don't know who my parents were before they had me. I don't know what their traumas were, what their challenges were. And even as you on this webinar, you've had challenges and you've had different seasons and ups and downs in your lives, highs and lows. And so when you look at these young people and these children during this adoption process, you look at, you have a lens of a vision of who they can aspire to be, who they can go off off to accomplish when they have the right resources and the right support and love, right? But who were they before you met them? And so, in that relatability, I love that, and I'm a Drake fan. Is the importance of knowing who they are outside, what is their identity outside of adoption? What is their identity outside of their placement? What is their identity outside of their caseworkers? So that is so key to connect those dots. And I'm glad Chelsea brought that up, is to learn who they are. They have culture, they have favorite rap songs, they have favorite books. I am a Harry Potter fan. You hear me? Gryffindor only. But just learning who they are outside that, because that provides them a level of normancy as well. Let's do away with the checkbox and the clipboard and the binder every time. You can leave the binder in the back seat sometime. Put it under the seat. You got to have the documentation. We know you got to have it all tabbed up in electronics. You got your iPad and you're doing a checklist. But sometimes let's just provide a sense of normalcy. And so 80, I'll tell you two things before we move on. 80% of communication is nonverbal. So as I love that connecting doesn't always require words, just sitting across, even in a space now as adults, it is healthy to just sometimes you'll be sitting in a room with your loved one and family or friend, and just them being there provides a level of safety and just a level of calmness without having to go through deep conversations or all those other things. But would also encourage you all to look into open-ended questions. It encourages the youth voice. It allows the youth their thought to have their own thoughts rather than choosing limited from a limited option. Promote emotional expression. Youth can talk about their feelings, fears, and hopes and confusion in the confusion process of the adoption journey freely. It reduces pressure. Open-ended questions feel less like an interrogation and more like a conversation, and we like more conversation. It builds trust and empowerment. The youth feel that their perspective matters and that the adults in their lives are truly listening. So I just want to quickly give you an example of some open-ended questions. What does the word family mean to you? How do you feel when people talk about adoption? What are some of the things that are important to you when you think about your future? Who are the people in your life that make you feel supported? And what questions do you have about adoption or permanency? Those are super easy, super conversational questions that you can ask and open-ended for the young person.
So involving youth in the adoption journey. I always say inform and involve from the start. Ask those youth or their children that you're working with what they need to feel supported. Not everything is a cookie cutter thing, right? We all know that. So ask them, what do you need to feel supported? Sometimes our children do not even know that they are in this adoption program or in this adoption unit. So explain to them what that means to them. And you'll be surprised that you may be the only person explaining to them what it means to be in the adoption program. So it's so important at this stage that you're so transparent and that you talk to them about what this adoption process looks like. We did a training back in October, me, David, and another colleague, Erica, and we really talked about, so y'all can go back and watch it if y'all need to, but we talked about learning about what type of programs that there are involved. Texas has so many best practices and so many different programs that we have evolved from 10 years ago. We have, example, heart galleries where we're on now. Explain to them what it means to be in the heart galleries, what it means to go to a match event, what it means to be part of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, what a recruiter does for you. You could even go as far as like showing them the heart gallery website and what that entails and letting them know that being a part of these programs, what it could mean and what it can't mean. You don't want to overpromise things, of course, but letting them know that they have the option to be a part of these programs, because some during our convenings we were talking about heart galleries and we were talking about just like all the amazing adoption programs that are out there, and you'll be so surprised how many these youth said, I didn't even know that these programs were out there. Why wasn't I involved in there? Like, I want to be part of that. I'm like, well, you're 22 now. I'm fortunate that ship has sailed, but it was so many like they didn't even know about it because at 15 they said, you know what, I don't want to be adopted, and it was kind of just like they were marked off of that adoption list, and they were never even offered these programs. So they may not be a part of any of these adoption programs, but explaining to them that this is their right. They have options to be a part of all of these amazing programs, and they also have the right to say that they don't want to be a part of it, and that's okay. But letting them know that there's programs out there that can help lead to permanency. Like I said, you'll be so surprised how many those 205 adults, young adults that we talked to weren't a part of any of these.
And as I reflect on my process again, as I told you, the way it was presented to me, it was not packaged correctly. It did not have a Tiffany bow on it as I wanted to. And so my experience was negative. And so I did not understand the support wasn't there, the language wasn't there. And it's important to use appropriate language when you're dealing with young people and talking about removing them or cutting ties or whatever the case may be when it comes to their biological family. Because you have to understand too, in the lens that we're seeing things, you're seeing it as this is a safer environment, this is more nurturing, this is more support. You're coming from an abandonment, you're coming from trauma and all that. But the young children don't see it that way. They see that you are taking them from their hero. They don't know that they're surviving versus thriving with their biological family. And so sometimes it's just the narrative of how you present to the young person. I know that there was so many negative connotations around my parents because they had substance abuse issues, right? And so CPS just deemed them unfit right off the bat. They was like, hey, this is your second time in foster care. We're going to go ahead and move with termination of rights. And for me, I had experienced them, and even though it wasn't the best, it was my experience, and it was the only thing that I had to hold on to. So I was not willing to sever ties with that. And but had it been explained differently, had I been told all my options, had I been given these programs as Chelsea has talked about, would have made me have a really true informed decision about, hey, I can still have this relationship with my biological parent, or I understand that they're not in the space to care for me, and these people are, or this is a better situation for permanency. And we were talking, we did a presentation 2 weeks ago, and to understand the language and the shifting the language and the conversation around permanency is so key. Long-term connections is so key. I have met so many amazing people that did not end up being my adoptive parents, or I've opened the door to the life of adoption to people who knew nothing about it because they wanted to do it with me, but it didn't work out. And they call that a failed adoption. However, it did not work out for them, for me, but it worked out for them for another young children or youth or family. And so when you talk about how to cultivate this experience and personalize it, you have to be in tune and aligned with what the child needs and what their dynamics with their biological family is in order to be more successful or to be more incorporating for that young person or that child.
So when to start the conversation? I get this question a lot, even from like not just professionals, but from families. Like when should we start this conversation? I always say start it early and continue it often. Adoption should be a part of the child's story from the beginning of the conversation, and it evolves as they grow. Adoption is a lifelong conversation, just not a single event. It's something that's going to be a part of their lives from 2, 3 years old till they are great great grandparents. Like it's always going to be a part of their life and their story. So you don't want to hold it as like, well, we don't want to wait because they're not old enough yet. Because then sometimes it feels like a secret or something bad or something negative that they don't want to talk about because it's been this hidden conversation for so many years. Children process adoption so differently. So it's important that we do normalize their story as to their age. But I always say to start it often.
I think that that's key. And Chelsea's going to talk about the age appropriateness, but use your resources. There's so many resources out there to guide and assist those conversations. And to, if you're like me, or if you're like another young person that's a visual learner, there's so much visual roadmaps and cartoons and children's books that help lead to those conversations to make those conversations more easier to navigate.
Yeah, so like David said, for young children, we want to use the simple language and the reassurance about belonging and safety. A caregiver can say, your birth parent, loved you, but they just couldn't be there the way for you that I'm there for you now, or that this adoptive family is going to be there for you. So storybooks about adoption can really help for the younger children to understand what adoption means. And for school age, children get older and they begin to ask more complex questions and thinking about more deeply about their identity and their biological family connection. So this is a time where they may experience a lot of different, more mixed emotions. And for teenagers, adoption conversations often become more focused on the identity, relationships, and understanding of their past. Teens may want more information about their birth family at this time, and they may want to be more control over their story and how it's shared. So this is where the honesty and respect for their autonomy becomes really, really important here.
And I had I was going to be put up for adoption at 11. I declined, and later in life, as going through life, I realized that hey, adoption was a better option. Can I go back and change my answer? And then I had a failed adoption in my teenage years, and it literally it crushed me. It hurt me deeply. I couldn't understand. I couldn't. It wasn't a lot of conversation around it. And it was just a conversation that could have been better had and better explained. And I needed some affirmations and some reassurance that I wasn't the problem because when young people come into foster care or a child welfare system for whatever reason, every young person that comes into care is not there because of drug addiction, parents, or abuse. Some have come from small families. Some come from terminally ill loved ones passed away. No one out of state, whatever, relocated. Those are the cases. Some parents are incarcerated, right? And so for me, that embarrassed me. That hurt me deeply. I felt like I wasn't worthy. I felt like I had got to the end of an adoption process and it did not go through. But what is important is also too, when I was going through that process, the older you get, the more you do feel like you're betraying your biological family. You're betraying your namesake. You're just turning your back on all that you've known and who brought you into this world, and they will not love you like we love you, and all those other things that go around in the young teen's head when they're talking about adoption. But again, it is our job, it is your job, it is us's job to make sure that we affirm these young adults, young teens, and these children when they have these feelings that arise. And it can be triggering at times. It could be a reminder that of something that happened to them when they weren't in care or something like that. So I just want to make an emphasis on, making sure that we affirm children and teens through this adoption process, and whatever the outcome may be, reassure them that connections are still connections. Life happens in unexpected things, and this is how we have to be able to move forward for better in the future. I will tell you, I had a child advocate at 11. That same child advocate, she was so instrumental in my life and a permanent connection. After my case was closed or moved on to the next tier, I was not able to communicate with her anymore, and they didn't even let her say goodbye, right? But between her, the judge, and my child advocate, 30 years later, I still remembered her. 30 years later, I still remember what she did for me and how she was honest with me. And I went looked for her. I could not find her, but I found her on LinkedIn. Shout out to LinkedIn. 30 years later, I found her, and my message to her is, do you know how you changed my life? Do you know how you impacted me from that? Do you know that that little boy at 11 years old sitting in that courtroom in the judge's chamber remembers that? It changed me. It validated me. And I've had many experiences since then that have created self-doubt. I made many mistakes. I've had many adults to still walk out or feel like I was too much to deal with. But that 11-year-old boy was validated through transparency, through honesty, through centering my voice in decision making, and it made a difference. And so 30 years later, she's way older now, but she remembers me and we have a relationship. We go to lunch, we stay communicating and connected. And so in this space that we're in, even if it's not the adoption process, the ending that you wanted to do, please do not forsake the connection. Please do not forsake the permanency. Please do not forsake the moment and the time and the space and the energy that you're giving these children in this space. Because if you can't give your time, give your talent. If you can't give your talent, give your treasure. They will remember it. I am on this webinar to reaffirm you all and to recharge you and to inspire you and motivate you that what you do matters and what you do counts. And there might be some adaptability and some perspective changing. It's been years, but the formula is the formula. Heart posture, the formula is the formula. Passion, the formula is the formula. Being very innovative and personalizing these experiences for these children during this adoption process and this conversation. And I'm sorry, guys, I get on a little tangent. Chelsea got to wink twice, but that's just my giving you my wisdom and my knowledge.
No, no, no. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And we could really stay on like each of these slides for an hour. Because y'all giving us y'all's lunch hour. We're so appreciative of you guys. But there's so much detail that goes into each of these slides. So, just bear with us as we're trying to cover everything. Shared choice and voice. I love this slide, and we were coming up going through our slides earlier this week, and we are like, should I take this one out? And David's like, no, you can't take it out because it all of this is such important information. So involving youth and their family selection by showing them life books of the family, and if the family doesn't have a life book, we can always ask the family, hey, let's create something that we can help represent you to these children, whether it be pictures of like your home, your bedrooms, your young adults. And I know they have what's called life books out there. I just don't know how often they are enforced. I'm sure majority of you or some of you have been a part of that, the RAD selection, review, approval, and selection. And we're asking this from families, right? We're asking, show us your life book, show us your home study, show us, your training and everything that you have. These children who they're going to deserve the exact same thing. They deserve a very similar process. So just remember that whenever we're thinking about involving these adoption conversations with these youth, and when possible, if it's safe, we want to include biological family members in the selection. David kind of talked on this earlier, but he kind of felt like it was going to be a portrayal if he chose adoption versus not. So if we can include these kin families, biological family members in this adoption process. A lot of the times kinship families can't adopt for certain reasons, but that doesn't mean they should be 100% X'd out of that child's life forever. They're always going to have a connection with their biological family. Like I said, of course, if it's a safe option. So why not include them in the most important decision of that youth's life? Why not? Why would we X them out of that and just depend on attorneys and caseworkers to make all these decisions? If it's safe, let's bring them into that conversation. Oh my gosh, sorry. My mouse has its own brain.
You're good. I don't want you'd already talked.
Sorry. Sorry. And then and for adoption days as well, like let's plan this together. And we talked about this in our training that we did for you guys last year as well. So like I said, if you want to go back and look at it, you can. This is just a very high level, but let's not just follow those minimum standards, licensing standards of just 3 visits for pre-placement. Let's see if the child needs 10 pre-placement visits, let's give them 10 pre-placement visits. If they want to let's have them have a voice in what those pre-placement adoption visits look like. It's very important that they feel safe and that they feel secure before they're moving into a new home or into their adoption placement. And if they do feel safe and they feel like they've had a voice especially this pre-placement visits, it's more likely that the adoption is to be successful and not end up in a disruption. So let's ask them, what they want their adoption day to look like, what they want the pre-placement visits to look like. These are all such important things that we may just see as a checklist. Like, it's adoption day, finalization day. All right, yeah, we're excited about it, but it's something off our to-do list. To these young adults and to these families, this is what they've been waiting for their lifetime, literally their lifetime sometimes. So let's make it special for them. And then just some key takeaways that we hope that you take away. Professionals, like we said, play such an important role in helping families being honest with these conversations with children before adoption finalizations. Children benefit when adults communicate openly and use appropriate language and create space for those open-ended questions and for the questions that they may have. And like we talked about, adoption is just not a one-time discussion. It's something that is ongoing and that can be revisited. And caregivers or professionals, we don't need to know the answers at all the time, right? But it's important for us to be willing to learn and to find the answer when it's appropriate for those children. So I'm being cognitive on time as well. But one thing that I want to ask you is, what's one step you will take this week to help navigate the adoption conversations in your role, either as a caregiver, as a professional, as an adoptee. What's one thing that you can help navigate those adoption conversations?